Welcome to this session. I am P.S. Khandelwal. I started my banking career in 1974 with State Bank of India, and I retired at the end of 2017 from IndusInd Bank as Chief Compliance Officer. Today's subject is soft skills and strategies for recovery of bank loans. We shall discuss following topics today: dealing with difficult borrowers, strategy for recovery, and role of farmers clubs and self-help groups, SHGs. Friends, we are at the last stage of this course of financial inclusion. We have seen various aspects of financial inclusion. Why financial inclusion started, what it involves, what sort of efforts are being taken, what are various banking products, financial products, etc., and strategies for bringing in financially excluded sector within the fold of financial sector, formal financial sector. We have seen an important component of financial inclusion is extension of financial credit to these weaker sections, poorer people, people who have not been part of the financial sector. Linked to credit facilities provided to this is the aspect of recovery. Recovery is an integral part of financial credit, and it's very important and vital, we all know. So we shall learn something about the recovery aspects, discuss about that. Now, one common myth among people is recovery is a matter of action or is a matter of concern only when an account becomes difficult or borrower is not paying, or only when in case of NPA. This is a misplaced notion. Recovery really is an aspect which begins at the very beginning. And when I say at the very beginning, not only that as soon as we have given the loan, but even prior to that, when a credit facility is being sanctioned to a person. Recovery begins right at that stage. How? Essentially, while extending credit, what one does, one fixes up the time for repayment, how the loan will be repaid, whether in one lump sum or then after how much period, or in installments and what type of installment. Right at that stage, keeping in mind various aspects which affect recovery, which could help in repayment, and fixing up repayment schedule accordingly is also a part of recovery efforts. Fine. Then, in case of normal loans, as the normal situation is, recovery, while borrowers would repay on their own, but efforts for recovery to help. If they are being sustained, it does help in normal recovery. But not always does recovery happen normally. Not all borrowers will always repay on time, and not always the recovery may be happening appropriately. So it leads to a situation that there are some difficult borrowers. Now, these difficult borrowers, what does it mean? It means the borrowers who can pay but do not want to pay. There will be always some section, despite all uh, appropriate due diligence having been done, borrower's creditworthiness having been examined, we will end up in a situation when certain loans have been given to certain persons who borrowed with the intention of not repaying it. They are known as willful defaulters. Sometimes it gets aided by certain external factors. Features: how do you identify such borrowers? It's not very difficult. Two very simple aspects which can give us the clue is: one, a borrower who avoids taking your calls on one pretext or another. You try to contact him on phone and he will never be taking up. And then if you ask him later on sometime, he'll give some excuse like he was busy, he was elsewhere, he did not come to know your call, etc. He avoids meeting. First, he does not agree for meeting on some excuse or other. Even after having agreed and fixed an appointment, at the last moment he cancels the appointment on the pretext of some other emergency situation. And such type of behavior goes on recurring. These are clear signals that borrower is simply avoiding and he has no intention of repaying. In such cases, what is important? One needs to document and preserve the evidence of negative responses of the borrower. That yes, whatever has happened, with all facts, with all precise information, at what time, on which date, what efforts were made, if some conversation has taken place, what was the nature of conversation, what was the response which the borrower has given, if he has cancelled the appointment, at what time he cancelled the appointment when it was fixed for. All these things should be recorded. Whenever meetings take place or discussions take place with such borrowers, even on phone call or face-to-face meetings, making audio recording of such discussions, telephonic or personal, is very useful. Such audio recordings should be done with the full knowledge of the borrower. In fact, even during the discussion, when the discussion begins, it should be told upfront on the discussion, which also gets recorded, that yes, the borrower is aware that yes, the conversation is being recorded. Sending out written reminders is very important while dealing with such borrowers. These reminders can be through postal registered post letters. Today's times, emails are there. Borrower has email, then they should be through emails. The contents of these reminders is very important. It is useful and important to include in these reminder letters, etc., full details of the dues from the borrower, the efforts which have been made to contact him, how many times he has been contacted, what are the assurances the borrower had given, or even recording those contact efforts when borrower has avoided the calls, giving details of how many times calls were tried, on which number at what time, date, etc. All these become, and but they were not responded to, or even after meeting so many time and assurances which were given, borrower has not fulfilled those assurances. All that should be put on record in this. These become very useful in future. Now, recovery does not happen naturally. See, to be successful in any efforts, in any venture, if it is strategized properly, it makes it more successful. Recovery is such an important aspect for the sustainability of the business that having appropriate strategy for recovery is very useful. It helps optimizing the recovery efforts, make the recovery efforts more efficient. It helps in enhancing, maximizing the recovery of the bank loan and minimizing the NPAs or write-offs of the bank. This so a strategy is something which helps in achieving a set goal or objective, and this is what is achieved by having a strategy for debt recovery. Certain useful guidelines for debt recovery are: the collection process, which will be used by the banks, has to comply with recovery norms and regulatory guidelines. One cannot start forcing for recovery or emphasizing or stressing for recovery of installments which have not fallen due. The norms are, yes, you start emphasizing. Sending a advance reminder to repay on time is just a courtesy reminder, and it helps in making the borrower conscious. But to press for advance recovery is not within the norms. Regulatory guidelines need to be followed. Banks cannot do recovery through forcible measure of using strong arm tactics. Can't employ people to muscle men for doing recovery like Patani recovery. Banks are formal organization and they need to follow only legally valid, legally approved processes. At what time recovery is being done, recovery efforts are being made is very important element of strategy, recovery strategy. It should be synchronized to the cash inflow of the customer. What does it mean? Say, if one has given car loans to several salaried people, the installment for car loan should ideally be fixed on the salary day or very close to the salary day, because that is the time when these salaried people have inflow of funds and they will be able to repay. In fact, in most of the corporate tie-ups where it is being done, it's the EMI deduction is done by the organizations from the salary. But in case of rural sectors, that may not always be feasible. But nevertheless, fixing up the schedule accordingly that yes, it is on the close to salary day, not too much after salary day. And following up with the borrower at that point of time enhances the prospect of recovery because the person has the funds available before he spends it on any other voluntary expenditures, discretionary expenditures, he will first repay. In case of farmers, crop loan recovery, repayment of crop loan is ideally done when the produce is harvested and sold in the market. At the time of sowing, asking for recovery of a crop loan would not serve any purpose. By that time, the farmer would not have cash remaining with him at all. With the SMEs, small, medium enterprises or artisans, self-artisans, etc., to go for recovery whenever their collection happens. And at that time, to ask for recovery would be appropriate time. The recovery approaches, recovery efforts could be broadly tailored according to three broad categories of borrowers. One is the normal debtors. Normal debtors are those whose intentions are very clear, clear. They want to repay and they will repay. They may need some reminder or sometimes they may need some persuasion. They might accept in case of very grave emergency when their fund position gets impacted too severely. These are the persons who do not wish to default voluntarily. So reminding them in advance, keeping normal touch with them helps in prompt recovery in repayment by them on due date or prior to due date because they don't even want to pay more interest will always be useful, and therefore having most efficient almost 100% recovery from these type of borrowers is possible just by following the usual method of keeping them reminding. Sometimes if they happen to get into a little sticky situation, some persuasion can help in normalizing recovery from them. There are difficult debtors about whom we had just discussed short while ago that they do not have intention to pay. They can pay but will not pay. Now these are the borrowers which have to be handled in a different manner altogether. There are doubtful debtors. These doubtful debtors are persons who cannot pay the full amount but who can perhaps very much pay some reduced amount on which may need negotiation. These are debtors who might have gone in to face some difficulty. Either their particular venture has gone into loss, taken the loan, and so financially impacted them adversely. They are not readily too much willing to repay out of other sources which would impact their livelihood, which might even impact their normal day-to-day living. So for these persons, they tend to then extend and rather default than naturally their usual living impact their usual living today. These type of persons on negotiation, they might be agreeable to pay certain reduced amount. So for all these three types of thing, the first normal debtor we have discussed, yes, how do we go about it? It just requires the normal follow-up, etc. For other two, let us see what methods can be there. Certain other points about recovery strategy are important, useful for discussion. Recovery efforts should start with establishing a good rapport. Establishing a good rapport with borrowers right from the beginning, from the time that their loan is being sanctioned, becomes very useful in recovery prospects later on. In case of normal borrowers, it will ensure very smooth recovery of all installments or all loans, etc., because the borrower already is linked personally and would not like his or her image to be dented in any way. In other cases, communication skills, listening skills, and service skills, which help in building up good interpersonal relations, also helps in recovery prospect. Makes it very easy in case of normal borrowers, makes it easy. These interpersonal relations even make it easy to deal with dif- doubtful borrowers and sometimes even handling difficult customers or difficult borrowers, particularly if a network is there and if the some other sources could be used to influence these difficult borrowers. At the time of dealing with doubtful and difficult borrowers, certain other aspects that when one goes for recovery, collecting full information about the borrower, know the customer's proper identity, proper profile, having all information from the documents available within the bank is the first step. Studying the loan agreement carefully so that one knows properly full amount, the repayment schedule, the securities charged, etc., and note down all the details, even the information which was provided by the borrower at the time of taking the loan about his financial status, about what were the expected business, what business he was doing. Having all those things noted down prior to going for recovery becomes useful in proceeding with and dealing with and discussing with the borrower. Apart from the information available from internal sources, to gather information from market, from other associates, other networking individuals who happen to know about this borrower, but it's particularly true in case of villages and rural areas where people tend to know and usually do know a lot of details about each other. So having all that information ready during the discussions can help in trying to negotiate and persuade. So using negotiation skills and persuasive skills with this knowledge can make it very effective. One should maintain a notebook for each debtor of at least of these two categories, difficult and doubtful customers, in which all information about recovery efforts should be recorded in detail. This is very important because it serves two purposes. Number one, periodic reports to the banks, which are to be given, can be prepared on the basis of this diary, and those reports are substantiated by these notes. More importantly, this is very useful for the banks if bank requires to file suit against these borrowers in court cases, then those details can become part of the complaint and this diary can become an evidence in case of these recovery cases to prove bank's case, especially in case of willful defaulters, to establish to the bank, to the court, that the borrower has the ability to pay, but is not paying willfully, just deliberately. Whenever recovery efforts fail, they do not bring about the desired recovery. It becomes important to give legal notice. This legal notice should be served well in time, keeping in mind limitation period, and in the legal notice, time is provided to the borrower for repayment of entire dues. Now, in the legal notice, certain details are important to be included. One, the claim amount to be included in the legal notice should be including interest at a higher rate which is charged on overdue amounts. Also, it should also include those expenditures incurred for legal and other recovery expenses. Other step which is taken in case of overdue loans which can be taken is possession on security, and where security can be directly taken possession of, then recovery through the disposal to be done, and for balance amount, court case to be filed. While these are the direct recovery efforts and recovery strategies which banks can use, in rural areas for related to agriculture particularly and other rural borrowers, in case of other rural borrowers, there are certain other aspects which can be used. Now, farmers clubs is one forum available particularly for recovery of agriculture related loans. NABARD had started a movement of or set up a platform Vikas Volunteer Vahini. And the principles under Vikas Volunteer Vahini were credit use, bank credit will be used by the borrowers for doing agriculture or cultivation as per scientific and technology methods, improved methods. So it was promoting use of scientific and technology methods for better productivity. Credit terms and conditions would be fully followed. Skilled work, there should be skills, certificate skills which will increase production and productivity for any allied activities. Additional income which will be generated or which is generated through the credit assistance received, this additional income should be saved rather than spent, being spent away. Loan agreement should be adhered to, and regular and timely repayment should be there to recycle the credit. Later on, farmers' clubs have been established. These farmers' clubs are established through the rural branches of the banks, NGOs, and Kisan Vikas schemes, KVKs. NABARD provides support and financial assistance for establishing the farmers' clubs. Farmers' clubs are for the mutual benefit of banks and farmers because it brings banks and farmers on the same platform. They can interact on common issues, resolve any uh, issues which are disruptive or which are of concern to the farmer community, find out solutions and how banks can be useful or financial institutions can be useful in helping out in those situations. This forum of Farmers Club can also be used for the purpose of recovery because then in this forum certain concerns about certain areas or certain delinquent borrowers, etc. And the forum can work as a common social persuasive force on those defaulting persons, especially persons who are able to pay but do not intend paying. Having some type of community persuasion, community pressure upon them can make them relent and make payment. There is another platform available in these rural areas, that is self-help groups, which could be useful for both farm loans and non-farm loans, even in case of rural artisans and other self-employed persons in rural areas. It helps. The self-help groups, as we know, is of groups of small groups of persons who come together, who are from the similar type of activity or from same locality and area, and it helps them raise credit as a group in group. Usually there might be even group guarantee available, and therefore recovery through self-help groups, having follow-up through self-help groups becomes very useful. Contacting the borrowers is easier because the group knows each other very well, and if any members of the group tend to default, other members of the group try to persuade that persons not to do so, because it impacts all, not only the defaulting members but even the regular payment members, because their future borrowing ability is impacted. They will find it difficult to get the loans from the banks. So friends, today we have discussed how to make recovery efforts for recovery through difficult borrowers. What are the skills which are useful and what methods can be used for this? Thank you so much for listening. I hope this information has been useful to you and you will have enjoyed it. Thank you.